In this module, we're going to teach you exactly what you need to know in order to figure out how to get around and deal with the gatekeepers that you encounter when prospecting. This area is critical for you to at least have some knowledge, some logic, and a game plan for how to operate, because you can realistically spend almost 50% or more of your cold calling time dealing with gatekeepers. And a gatekeeper naturally falls into the role of the enemy, meaning you as a salesperson and the gatekeeper as a receptionist, or the role that she plays in the or he or she plays in the organization, will naturally be on the other side of the table. You all will have opposing objectives, and because of that, you naturally fall into the role of enemies of one another. But although gatekeepers typically have a tremendous amount of knowledge, they will know sometimes how the organization is structured, who does what, and who the contacts are that you need to connect with. They might have knowledge about projects and initiatives. They might have knowledge about the existing processes and maybe some challenges that are going on. So if you're able to turn this enemy into an ally, you can immediately see improvements in your results. And we're going to show you exactly how to do that here. Before we get going, let's outline a few different types of gatekeepers that you can encounter. And this is important because each type has different characteristics and can often be dealt with in different ways and have different expectations for how they're going to deal with you. The first category that we'll look at is a front desk receptionist. And this is someone that you can picture actually in a reception area of maybe an office. Maybe they work in a lobby and they answer the phone. And they also do some other activities like checking in people that arrive at the office that are guests of employees that work there. They might receive packages from delivery individuals frequently throughout the day. They may answer phones and those are some of the calls that you might be on. Now, because there's so much going on, things are very chaotic with this type of individual. Their day is very fast paced, and so you need to know that, and you can often think about these individuals because they often, if you start asking them some questions, they might put you on hold, and they might get rid of you fairly quickly. So let's think about what this individual knows, and the reality is that they often are knowledgeable about the organization, at least the organization maybe at the office that they work at, and the reason why is because they might have to get packages sent to particular people. They might have to check in guests, as I already mentioned, for particular people, and because of that, they might know who is who. So if you ask them some organizational questions and you don't know who to speak to, they might know who to connect you with if you deal with them in the right way. Or should I say they'll know they might know who to connect you with, and they might do that if you deal with them in the right way. This individual, although, will have a decently high focus on screening you out, meaning they will be assigned with the direction of don't let cold callers come in, or salespeople, don't let them through. Just in the same way that they get training of, when UPS shows up, you need to do this and put the packages here. They'll get training on, okay, when salespeople call, say this or ask them that. So this type of individual will typically be considered. This is someone who will do some filtering to make sure it makes sense to let you through, and they will also be trained on how to deal with you. Just like you're going through training right now on how to deal with them, they often will be given at least some sort of direction on things to ask to get rid of you. And we'll talk about some of the things they'll say later in this module. Another type of gatekeeper are switchboard operators. Now, you might not know this, but these are just people that are hired and responsible for transferring you to the person that you're supposed to connect with. And you might not know what type of environment this person sits in, but a lot of times, well, most often, they're not at a receptionist area. They're sitting in a room, and all they do is take incoming calls. They could even be actually outsourced to some sort of call center. Because all they do is deal with incoming calls, their environment's a little less chaotic. They're not multitasking as much, so that you can actually get a little bit more time from them to ask them questions. Although, while that sounds great, they actually have less knowledge of the organization. All they do is route calls. So typically, they're not going to know who's in what department. All they will know is what information they have access to, which is probably some sort of directory in some sort of software application that they're logged into. These are the types of individuals that if you don't have a name of an individual, they won't know who to connect you with. And a title typically won't do anything. Even knowing they almost seem amiable and willing to help, they just don't have that knowledge. So they're available, but only so limited. And they really won't focus on screening you out at all. You could call them back 10 times, and they're not going to, meaning asking for 10 different people, and they're not going to care. Their job is just to put you through. So they're not going to screen you at all, and they won't get defensive and protective. They're just basically, as they're labeled, they're switchboard operators. So some characteristics there, and I guess the takeaway there is don't be too scared of them, and then also don't look for too much help from them. Another category are executive assistants. So these are individuals that aren't at the receptionist area. These are people that are sitting in an office area. They're part of a department. For example, if you're calling into IT or finance, there might be an administrative assistant, an executive assistant, that is assigned to that department. And maybe they might sit next to the executive and be their assistant. That's why they're called an executive assistant. But they might be responsible for fielding requests and doing duties for the whole department. They have a medium level of chaotic environment, meaning the phone's not ringing all day. They don't have delivery people coming in. It's more of a normal office environment, but they might have a lot of requests coming in from different directions. But it's at a medium level. It's not going to be as bad as a front desk receptionist. These individuals, and this is the important thing to take away here, these individuals you typically have a very high level of knowledge. And you wouldn't think so because you think, well, they're a gatekeeper or they're an assistant. But these people often know extensive details about the organization. They might have deep knowledge about processes and systems that are being used, vendors that they're doing business with. They might know about current initiatives and projects and challenges. These individuals might sit in on different meetings to take notes and might actually be looked at for an opinion on decisions that are being made. So you really don't doubt the level of influence and power that these individuals have. And quite honestly, when you can't get a hold of the key person, the key decision maker, and they have an executive assistant, they're a great person to work with and to build rapport with and to get them on your side. These individuals will do a medium level of screening, meaning the front desk receptionist, they might just try to block out everybody. I mean, if you sound like a salesperson, but you're actually delivering a truck of money, they're going to say, we're not interested, right? I mean, they use very little logic and reasoning and just screen everybody out. A executive assistant isn't just going to pass anybody through to the person that they report to. So they will do some screening, but the good thing about executive assistants is they actually typically will use a little bit more thoroughness and diligence in terms of who they screen out. They'll ask you some good questions, so they won't just say we're not interested and without even hearing what you have to say. They might try to look at what you're doing. They might try to send you to the correct person if you're calling somebody who might not be appropriate. So they will screen, they will do some screening, but it's actually more in a professional way, and sometimes the screening they do is more appropriate. Meaning, if it really doesn't make sense for you to get through, they'll let you know. And so that's executive assistants. The last category that we're going to look at are automated phone trees, and these are actually the appropriate label is called auto attendants. And these are those automated menus that answer the phone and give you a list of options. And these are becoming more and more common as technology advances and as companies look to decrease costs. These are actually probably these can often be more difficult than actually dealing with a human, just because they're extremely time consuming to try to get through, and sometimes if you don't know exactly who you're trying to reach, these won't do you any good. These are extremely common in larger organizations, and you can often spend a lot of time really trying to get through to a person. So those are some types of gatekeepers. If you can kind of separate those and realize which one you're dealing with when at that particular moment, that can help you to use some of the tactics that we're going to talk about in this module. One tactic that is important just in dealing with people in general, especially anybody that starts out kind of as your enemy, is to understand them. And so let's talk about understanding the gatekeeper, because as they begin to take their adversary role and we begin to take ours, there can begin to be frustration, hostility, defensiveness, especially as each party takes their footing in the ground. And so when this happens, let's stop to really try to understand what's going on their side. And a great quote that I love and live by is, "Seek first to understand in order to be understood," by Dr. Stephen Covey. And the logic there is we all want to be understood. And in a gatekeeper sales situation, we want the prospect and the gatekeeper to understand why it makes sense to let us in and all the great things that we have to offer. Well, if we want them to understand that, let's first, before we expect them to understand us, let's first try to understand them. So that's understand them before they can understand you, is kind of what that's saying. Another way to look at it is this other quote, which is, "Grant that I may not criticize my neighbor until I've walked a mile in his moccasins." So a way of saying don't judge someone until you've walked in their shoes. And so we can often get frustrated with a gatekeeper, but if we can kind of understand where they're coming from, that can lead us to a path of working together with them better, if not working to get around them. And so let's think about what's going on the gatekeeper side. Well, first of all, a day in their life, regardless of which type I told you, except the auto attendant, things are very hectic. You know, they're getting a high volume of calls and requests, a high volume of, and a lot of those calls that they're answering are sales calls, which can probably be kind of annoying. Salespeople trying to get in all day, especially when it's their job to figure out how to deal with and get rid of these people. And just like it's not easy to get around them, it's not easy for them to get rid of salespeople, and it's kind of their job. And the reality is this is just my own personal assumption, and it's not completely accurate in every case, but the reality is that probably not most gatekeepers grew up with the aspiration of being a receptionist, a front desk receptionist, an executive assistant. It's not, I mean, hey, it's a job, it's an honest living, but it's not something that someone dreams, it's not a job that someone dreams of. Not to say it's a horrible job, it's just not something that that someone aspired to. And that there's nothing wrong with that. We all sort of work a job, and it's a means to an end. But maybe they just don't. Maybe when you're talking to a gatekeeper, you're talking to someone who doesn't completely love their job. That could be the case. Maybe not in every scenario, but it could be the case. Some executive assistants can be fairly senior roles. and well paid. I mean, especially if you're an executive assistant to a CEO, you can make very good money and you can be extremely qualified. Um, but so but just know that sometimes you're dealing with someone on the other end of the phone and they don't love their job, and that's important to know. The other thing to know is that one of their main objectives is to keep cold callers out, meaning they a executive train somebody trained them with the goal of you're going to get cold calls from salespeople, don't let them through. And so when you are smooth enough to get around them, they actually in some ways might have failed at their job, and they could actually get in trouble when you get in. Meaning, just like it's your job to get through, and if you never get through a gatekeeper, you're failing at your job, and you could get in trouble. So there's a bit of a conflict of goals and objectives there, which again positions them to be your enemy. But it's important for you to know that they have that objective when they're being difficult. It's just like when you're negotiating with someone, it's important to know what their interests are, right? And especially when you have your interests and they have their interests, we need to know what each party wants and is working towards in order for us to reach any sort of agreement. So their goal is to keep you out, and it's important for you to know that. So let's talk about so that's understanding the gatekeeper, right? I mean, that can help us to understand where they're coming from, and help us to work better with them. And then now let's go through some very practical and real tactics that you can do to improve your ability to get around them. One is to enlist their help, and this is to shift from the goal here is to shift the gatekeeper from blocking you out to helping you, and it's all in the frame of your tonality and how you present yourself. So and I actually just did this morning on a cold call, and so let me just say, your goal is to get in contact with a certain person to schedule a meeting, let's say, right? Well, if I call and I say to a gatekeeper, and let's say I don't know who the name of a person, which was the case today. I didn't know the name of the person. I just knew the department of the person that I want to reach in a particular company. And so if I said, hello, this is Michael Halper. I'm calling from Sales Scripter. I am trying to reach the person in sales actually the department I was trying to call into today was marketing. And so if I said I'm trying to reach someone who oversees marketing to schedule a meeting to talk about your marketing initiatives and challenges, can you connect me? Who should I talk to, right? If I say something like that, I'm telling the gatekeeper that I'm a salesperson and I'm trying to sell something, and that tells them get rid of this person, right? But if I come at it from a less salesy and just more kind of lost, needing help, they still might think that I'm a salesperson, but it just positions them more. The natural instinct might be more for them to help me. So I called up today, and it's straight from this playbook right here. But I called up and I said, the gatekeeper answered, and I said, I said who I am and who the company I'm with, and I told them, I'm not really sure who I'm supposed to speak with. I'm trying to reach someone. Maybe you can help me here. I'm trying to reach someone in this department, or I'm trying to reach someone that oversees this. Can you help point me in the right direction? And so there's a little tonality of being lost, some curiosity, needing help, and it works. I mean, sometimes they're like, they just come to the conversation and they try to help you. And you can always be direct and ask, ask for their help and their advice. Can you help me to understand what the organization looks like, or who should I talk to? You can ask them about how particular processes work. Dealing with scheduling, actually scheduling a meeting. If you're talking to an executive assistant and they actually manage the calendar for the person that you're trying to reach, you could actually ask them for help and for advice. And this is where you could maybe get a little bit more salesy if you're talking to an executive assistant. You can share with them, and we'll talk about this later, but you share with them why you're calling, and you have a little conversation with them and focus on your value that you offer, and maybe ask them some of your qualifying questions. And then you could actually say, I mean, my goal is to get a meeting on Mrs. Smith's calendar. Can you help me with the best way to go about that, and what's the best way to schedule that meeting? So that's me asking the gatekeeper for advice in the area of scheduling a meeting, and they might tell you how best to go about that. Who knows? If you've done done things right, they might actually just put the meeting on the calendar that they manage with you and the target prospect. The other thing is, so a gatekeeper might block you out and do a really good job. And of course, you're trying to get through the gatekeeper and get to a prospect. And if you got to the prospect, you might do some things like deliver a value statement, ask them some pre-qualifying questions. You might talk about some common pain points. And let's say the gatekeeper blocks you out. You try to get in real quick. You say, hi, I'm trying to talk to Mrs. Martinez. And they say, well, she doesn't take calls from salespeople, or what's this in regards to, or whatever. Let's say the gatekeeper's shutting you down. Sometimes it can help just to take a step back and begin to treat the gatekeeper like the prospect. So when you're butting heads, you can actually say this. So the gatekeeper's shutting you down, you can say, actually, let me just take a step back here. Let me tell you who I am, why I'm calling, and let's maybe help you to understand why it is I'm trying to talk to Mrs. Martinez. But just to introduce myself, I'm Michael Halper. I'm with a company called SalesScripter, and what we do is we actually help VPs of sales to improve their ability to train and develop new sales resources. So that's why I'm calling. And maybe you know the answer to this. Do you know how long it takes you to take a new sales hire, and how long on average it takes them to get from new to ramped up and performing? And I'll just time out there on that example. But what I did there is I took a step back and I started to treat the gatekeeper like a prospect. And so I delivered my value statement and I asked a pre-qualifying question. Now what's going to happen then? Either a couple things are going to happen. Well, actually, what has already happened is I've begun to treat the gatekeeper with respect, and I've begun to educate them on why I'm calling and why it makes sense for me to come to get through. Now, what it also does is I'm asking them some qualifying questions. And actually, we're going to talk about this on another slide, asking a gatekeeper qualifying questions. But I'll wrap this up and then I'll reinforce it later. But so when you ask the qualifying question, they might be able to give me that answer, and then I'm getting good information without from the gatekeeper, or I'm asking them a question that they don't know the answer to, and that gives me a reason to get through and gives them less of a reason to keep shutting me down. We're actually going to talk about that again. But that's treating the gatekeeper like a prospect. If you can't get through, just start selling to them. Name dropping, this is extremely powerful. So the gatekeeper, when you reach them, their job is to filter you out, right? So as you're talking, they're assessing you. Is this an outsider? And what they're looking at is are you a friend or are you a foe? I need to get rid of all the foes and I need to let the friends in, okay? And a friend is an insider, somebody who's an internal employee. It's an external person who we're doing business with. A foe is an outsider trying to get in. And you're likely, if you're watching this training, you're likely going to be a foe to these gatekeepers. But we can trick them to think that we're a friend by name dropping. So you want to name drop. Any contacts that you've spoken to because it makes you sound like a friend. Here are some examples. I spoke with Tom. You're talking to the gatekeeper. And I spoke with Tom White in accounting, and now I'm trying to reach someone in HR. Can you point me in the right direction? And so so that works great. The gatekeeper hears you're talking with Tom. And then they're more receptive to you. Now you might say, well, that's great, but I haven't talked with anybody, so how can I name drop? Here's a trick. Name drop someone in the organization that you're planning on talking to, or that you would love to talk to but you haven't had a chance, or whatever. And if this is not lying. It's almost sort of it's the way you present it, but you could say something like this. Hi. I'm planning on meeting with Tom White in accounting, but before I do that, I want to be sure to meet with someone in HR. Can you point me in the right direction of who I should talk to in HR, or whatever? And so in this case, we haven't spoken with anybody. We haven't spoken with Tom, but we name dropped him. And we haven't lied here. We didn't say that we met with Tom. We said we're planning on meeting with Tom. So there's no lack of integrity in this response. But the way you present it, it can help you to seem like more of a friend than foe. You can also name drop some external clients just to establish credibility, and that could be like we work with Lumberlift and help them to decrease inventory costs. Mention an initiative. So you can maybe do some research and find out that there's look for press releases, and you could find out that there's some sort of project going on that can make you seem more like a friend. And if you don't know of an initiative, there are often some generic ones that are going on in every company. If you're calling at a C-level, they say, what's this in regards to, or you're trying to just establish that insider approach. You could say, well, I was calling to talk to them about the current project to decrease labor costs, and blah 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 blah. So just about every company has a decreased project to decrease costs, and even if they don't, it sounds like something that to the gatekeeper that is probably going on. So now this is where so this tactic is asking probing questions when you get shut down by the gatekeeper. And actually, you can do this even if you don't get shut down. And so the probing questions would be kind of your pre-qualifying questions that you should have a good list of. And the reason to ask these questions, we talked about asking them when you treat the gatekeeper like a prospect. But you can do this at any time to extract valuable information. It'll show them that you respect them. It'll help to build rapport. And again, when you ask questions that they don't know the answer to, it helps you to justify why it makes sense for you to get through. For example, when you ask a question and when they say, I'm sorry, I can't put you through to him. He doesn't take calls from salespeople. And then you say, okay, well, if I could. Just out of curiosity, do you know what your sales staff turnover is? And let's say he says, I'm not sure. I don't have that access to that information. You could respond with something like, oh yeah, see, that's exactly why we're trying to get through to Mrs. Phillips, is that we need that information, and we know that she's the person that will have that. What's the best way for us to get on her calendar? So that's a good example of them not knowing the answer helps you to justify getting through. Befriend the gatekeeper. This is one that people often try to do first, and it is helpful, but we kind of have it sort of towards the bottom of the list of the tactics. But be friendly with them. Catch their name, use their name often. You're likely going to get defensive and frustrated as they start to be difficult, and so focus on smiling while you dial. You could laugh while you're talking to them. If they are actually being ugly and difficult, don't laugh. Don't make fun of them and laugh at them. But if you act like you're not taking what they say seriously, even when they're being extremely serious, you might get them to sort of realize that they're being ugly and difficult. So that's all in your tonality. When they are being extremely difficult, you can share that you understand them. So part of, and this goes back to understanding the gatekeeper, and really understanding anyone in life, to really decrease that sort of conflict. Part of it is understanding where they're coming from, but then the second half of that is letting them know that you understand them, right? So if you walk a mile in someone else's moccasins, that helps you to know where they're coming from, but it's extremely powerful when you tell them, hey, listen, I know what it's like to be you. These moccasins are really torn up and I have blisters, and you must have that on a daily basis too, and that must really be horrible. That's sticking with that metaphor. If we translate that to a gatekeeper, if they're being difficult, it's really powerful you to say, hey, listen, I know you think I'm a salesperson and trying to get in, and it's your job to block me out. I know where you're coming from, and I know really what you're doing. And so what you say after there, that could be different things. You could go in a lot of different directions. But laying that groundwork, that letting them know, I understand what you're doing and what you're, where you're coming from, can help them to decrease their guardedness and help them to. What it does is it helps to take you from being on opposite sides of the negotiation table to be almost on the same side of the table, or at least you're sitting corner to corner and not face to face, if you can picture that. But you could say something like, I know you get tons of calls from salespeople trying to get in. It's your job to screen us out. I know where you're coming from, and like I said, there's a lot of things you could say after that. So an example of something you could say is, I'm not calling to waste your so and so's time. We've done some research. I just want to talk to them about this research. We provide an assessment. The assessment's at no cost. There's a tremendous amount of value that you guys get from it. Blah blah blah. I mean, whatever your story is, you can say it after that. But the goal here, the tactic here, is just to let them know that you understand them, and that's part of sort of befriending them, beginning to build rapport and a relationship with them. We of course need to talk about how to deal with the auto attendant and the automated phone tree. And so one of the goals here is to get to a human as quickly as possible, whether that's saying operator or pressing 0 to get to an operator. Worst case, you can just press a bunch of numbers to get to an extension. Will likely lead to someone who you're not. It's not the person that you should connect with, but you can then ask that person to maybe transfer you to the right department. Sometimes we will walk away, depending on the list of companies we have to prospect into. We will walk away from a company if there's a time-consuming auto attendant that when it takes like a long time to get to the phone to ring for our prospect, it's just not justifiable to spend that time, because you might have to call that prospect a lot in order to before you get a hold of them with voicemail and all the different things factored in. So if it's going to take me a lot of minutes just to get their phone to ring, and then I'm going to have to call them a bunch of times, I might just scratch them off the list. If I have a long list, there's only 10 target accounts that I need to get into, you need to do what you need to do. Another thing is, and this is the last tactic, is just to try to avoid the gatekeeper altogether, right? So this goes for a lot of the different types of gatekeepers, but if you call it off hours, you're not going to get them. And this applies to both receptionists as well as executive assistants. Call before 8, call during lunch, call after 5. You might, if you're actually, you won't get the front desk receptionist. You'll get the auto attendant, which maybe at some companies that helps you to get through. In some cases, if it's not a real difficult one, but if you're calling at a C level, maybe that executive answers their own phone during that time when the assistant is out. And one of the important things here is try to secure a direct line number when you can. Sometimes when you're talking to a gatekeeper, you could use that time to get the individual's direct line. Let's say you're calling an individual, and before they say I'll put you through, you say, you know what, could I actually get their direct line from you so I can just call them directly next time, and you can get the direct line. If they're being sort of defensive, they might not give that to you. So here's a tactic to use to get the direct line, is that you could call a gatekeeper and you can say, you know, I'm trying to call Mark Davis, and I can't get through. The number I have is, and you read the company main number, and then the main, like the prefix, and then you just change up the last 4 digits to something random, and you basically give them that number, and you say, I have their number as such and such, but it doesn't seem to be working. Maybe they moved offices, I'm not sure. Is that the correct? And you basically, instead of asking for the correct number, you're asking them, is that the correct number? And they'll say, well, let me, often if you present in that way, they'll say, well, let me look them up. Oh no, you have it wrong. The last 4 digits are this, and they give you the correct number. And then from there on out, you have the direct line, and you when you're prospecting to that prospect, you basically can avoid the gatekeeper. So that is extremely helpful and important as well. The last tactic is to not take it personally. And this is very important for you to remember, because if you're doing a lot of calling and you're dealing with a lot of gatekeepers and they start being difficult, you can begin to get defensive, like they're trying to break you down. And the reality is that it has nothing to do with you. And this might sound silly when we're here in this sort of academic type of environment, but when you're out in the field and you're getting beat up, you can think that they don't like you and you feel rejected. But the reality is it has nothing to do with you or who you are. That you are being rejected, but it's a rejection towards your company. It's a rejection towards the role you're in. It's nothing personal. They're just doing their job. It's their job to block everybody out. They don't know who you are, and keep in mind that their job is very difficult, and it's unpleasant. So don't take it personally. Now, when the gatekeepers try to get rid of you, they will give you objections. And so let's talk about these objections, and we're going to give you responses for those. And if you really just use these techniques that we're going to show you now, you should have an immediate improvement in your ability to deal with gatekeepers. And so we're going to go through these one at a time, but here are some common objections, and some of these may sound familiar, but gatekeepers often ask, what is this in regards to? Is this a sales call? She doesn't take sales calls. They will not be interested in that. We already use someone. Can you send me some information? You will need to send your information to our supplier line. And so what we teach, and we actually have an objections training module, so you may want to watch that. But what we teach is to not try to overcome these objections. So, and I won't go into too much detail on tactics because again, that's in that other module. But don't try to make when they say they won't be we're not interested, or they won't be interested. Don't try to tell them why they would be interested and overcome that. Make them from uninterested to interested. We say to redirect. So deflect the objection and keep the conversation going. And you can redirect to your value statement. You can redirect to your qualifying questions. You can redirect by disqualifying the prospect. And so let me demonstrate some of those. Now, one of the most common objections is, what is this in regards to? And a gatekeeper they'll ask this, and they ask this because what they want, because really the answer, if you give them an honest answer to this, it's going to be an answer that flags you as a salesperson, right? So you're calling basically to sell something, to schedule a meeting, to get information, right? So you can sell something, to see if they're a prospect. And if you answer that honestly, with something like, oh, well, I'm from such and such company and I'm trying to, schedule an appointment. I'm trying to schedule an introductory information. I'm trying to introduce myself to so and so. I'm trying to find out what your needs are. I'm trying to find out who you do business with. I'm trying to find out, whatever. That tells the gatekeeper we're not salesperson. I can get rid of them, right? They want to know if it's okay to get rid of you, because they also don't want to get rid of somebody that it doesn't make sense to get rid of, or that they might get in trouble for not getting rid of you. So that's why they ask this, and they ask this all the time, right? So what we want to do is and it's real simple, the solution here, redirect to your value statement. So they say, well, what's this in regards to? Oh, well, the purpose for my call is that so this is optional. So actually, I don't have a value statement here. So let me just give you a value statement. So one for sales scripter. Well, the reason why I'm calling is that we help VPs of sales to decrease sales staff turnover. And you just stop there, okay? And typically, when a gatekeeper hears that, they don't immediately hear you say something that says, "Oh, They won't respond with, "Oh my gosh, we've been waiting for someone to call that helps with that. Let me put you through. There's two people that I want to connect you with." Right? They don't respond in that way. But what they also don't get is they don't get what they were looking for in order to shut you down. So it's kind of like a curveball. It throws them off. And so either A, they'll give up and put you through, or B, the conversation will continue. And they'll get away from the what's this in regards to, and you can keep talking to them. So there's this optional disqualify here, which is after your value statement. You could say something like, and I don't know if you guys need what we provide, so I was just calling with a question or two. So that's optional. I personally love, they say, what's this in regards to? Just say one sentence value statement and period and sit there. And it's really interesting to see how that works. And that also works if it's a sales call. If they say, is this a sales call? Don't say yes, don't say no. Well, the reason why I'm calling is, we provide this. And also with your value statement, that's also something that it's difficult for them to respond with, that we're not interested in that. Because any value statement is going to talk about improving something. And so, when you talk, how can a gatekeeper can't say, oh, we're not interested in decreasing sales staff turnover. Even knowing that they almost, if they were smart, they could say, oh, we don't need to decrease sales staff turnover. The gatekeeper won't likely think along those lines. Their trigger responses are going to be, we're not interested and we don't need that. And it's more difficult to say either of those responses with the value statement. Oh, we're not interested in decreasing sales staff turnover. It's almost like saying, oh, I don't want to be healthy. I don't want to be healthy, or I don't want to be a good person. It's almost like it's a statement that it doesn't make sense for you to say out loud to somebody else. Anyways, I don't know if that makes perfect sense there or not with the examples, but let's move on to the next one. She doesn't take sales calls. They will not be interested in that. We are already using someone. So these are all kind of like similar objections that a gatekeeper will say, and basically they're trying to get rid of you. And these are actually the most frustrating, because that the gatekeeper typically doesn't really understand what you're calling about. They don't really. How can they say that the other person's not interested? How they're speaking for the prospect, and these can be very frustrating. But what you can do is you can respond with one of your qualifying questions. So a response here might be, "Oh, okay, I understand," and then you can optionally disqualify to say, "And I actually don't know if I'm actually we're not trying to sell you anything at this point. I don't even know if you're a good fit for what we provide. So if I could ask you real quick, are you guys doing anything to decrease sales staff turnover?" And so there's an example of the gatekeeper's trying to shut us down, and I redirect with a qualifying question. And either A, the gatekeeper's going to answer that, I might gather some good information. B, they're not going to know the answer to it, and then I can then respond here with, oh, I see. Well, that's why I'm trying to connect with, the person. The gatekeeper often might say, can you send me an email with your information? And this is just a blow off, especially when it comes from a gatekeeper. The gatekeeper is not going to take your information and most of the time and go and try and see who and get you a meeting, right? They're not going to start to sell for you. They have enough to do, right? They're just trying to get rid of you. So you want to redirect with a qualifying question, and a great one is, sure, I can definitely send you over my information. But so I know exactly what to send you. Do you mind if I ask, what are you guys doing to decrease sales staff turnover? And so there I just delivered one of my pre-qualifying questions. Again, the goal is to ask a qualifying question, keep the conversation going. Maybe they're not going to know the answer to that. Here's one. You need to send an email to procurement with your information. That's going to go nowhere. You can send an email over there, but that's just a black hole. And so this can be the same response as to send me your information. Oh, I understand, and I'm actually not trying to sell you anything. Don't even know if you're a good fit. Could I ask you real quick? And you ask one of your qualifying questions. So that is the module on dealing with gatekeepers. What we did there is we outlined different types of gatekeepers. You can spend almost or more than 50% of your time dealing with some form of those. The gatekeepers have the objective to keep you out. It's their job to keep you out. It's your job to get in. You can improve your ability to deal with gatekeepers. If you improve your ability to just be able to deal with these gatekeepers, you'll immediately improve your results because you can spend so much time dealing with them. They do have a tremendous amount of knowledge, so you want to be able to get on their side. And even if you can't get around them or get through them, try to get some valuable information from them. And try some of these tactics. Prepare. We went through some objections that gatekeepers are going to deliver you to you to get rid of you. Use some of those tactics. Prepare for those objections. You're sure to face them. And that is it. Hope that helps. Good luck. Happy hunting.